The story of a revolution that devoured its own people. If this story weren't a blood-soaked truth, it would have been dismissed as too preposterous to be believed. It begins not with gunfire, but in the dreamy cafes of Paris, where a group of Cambodian students, instead of studying philosophy or flirting with French mademoiselles, were busy burying their noses in the books of Marx and Lenin, dreaming of an impossible revolution. Our protagonist is Saloth Sar, a fellow with a gentle smile, whom the world would later come to know by a much more terrifying name, Pol Pot. Back in Paris, Pol Pot was not a brilliant student. In fact, he failed his exams repeatedly and eventually lost his scholarship. Perhaps out of bitterness toward the bourgeois educational system that failed to recognize his talents, he decided the best solution was to abolish the entire system. And not just education, but many other things as well. Together with like-minded comrades such as Angkar and Phnom Penh, they concocted a bizarre ideological stew. A dash of Marxism-Leninism, a sprinkle of Maoism, a heavy dose of radical Khmer nationalism, and a whole lot of paranoia. They believed Cambodian society had been contaminated by capitalism, the West, religion, and worst of all, cities. They dreamed of a pure agrarian society where everyone was a peasant, equal in poverty and labor. A year zero where history would be rebooted from scratch. And to have a fresh start, you must first clear out the old. The old, by their definition, included intellectuals, artists, teachers, doctors, people who wore glasses because glasses proved you read a lot, people who knew foreign languages, people with soft hands, proving you weren't a peasant, and anyone who didn't seem agrarian enough. While these elite minds were planning their grand purification, Cambodia back home was a tangled mess. The country was caught in the middle of the Vietnam War. Prince Sihanouk, a masterful politician, tried to walk a tightrope between the great powers, but was ultimately overthrown in a 1970 coup by his own general, Lon Nol, with backing from the United States. And this is when the stage was perfectly set for Pol Pot. The U.S., in an effort to cut off the Ho Chi Minh Trail, secretly dropped more bombs on the Cambodian countryside than were dropped on Japan during World War II. All of World War II. This bombing campaign killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, destroyed villages, and created a wave of hatred for the U.S. and the Lon Nol government. The Khmer Rouge, still a small guerrilla group at the time, seized this golden opportunity. They presented themselves as heroes. They told the peasants who had lost everything, "Look at what the Lon Nol government and the Americans have done to you. Join us. We will bring peace, justice, and drive out the foreigners." And the people, in their desperation, believed them. The Khmer Rouge's forces grew rapidly, not because their ideology was so appealing, but because American bombs did the recruiting work for them. On April 17, 1975, Khmer Rouge soldiers in black pajamas and krama scarves marched into the capital, Phnom Penh. The city's residents, exhausted by civil war and corruption, poured into the streets to welcome them as liberators. They waved flags and cheered, completely unaware they were welcoming their own death sentence. The joy lasted for a few hours. Immediately, soldiers with emotionless faces, mostly brainwashed teenagers, pointed their guns at the people and issued an order. Everyone must leave the city immediately. The Americans are about to bomb it. Go to the countryside. You only need to be gone for 3 days. Then you can return. It was a monstrous lie. More than 2 million people were herded out of Phnom Penh at gunpoint. The elderly, children, pregnant women, and patients still on IV drips in hospitals were all forced to march. Anyone who resisted, questioned, or walked too slowly was shot on the spot. This massive evacuation turned into a death march. Tens of thousands died along the way from hunger, exhaustion, and illness. Phnom Penh, once a vibrant city, became a ghost town in a matter of days. The most insane social experiment in history had begun. Welcome to democratic Kampuchea, also known as Hell on Earth. The new regime, calling itself Angkar, the organization, was a faceless, mysterious, and omnipotent entity. Angkar was the father, the mother, the state. Everyone had to obey Angkar without question. The family unit was abolished. Children were encouraged to spy on and denounce their parents. Romantic love was deemed a capitalist sentiment. Marriages were arranged en masse by Angkar. You could be eating your meal and be called out to marry someone you had never met. Refusal meant death. Money was abolished. Markets were closed. The national bank was blown up. Religion was outlawed. Temples were turned into warehouses or prisons. Monks were forced to disrobe or were killed. All books were burned. City dwellers, now called new people, were considered a lower class, to be re-educated through hard labor. They were sent to communes, which were essentially concentration camps. They were forced to work 12 to 16 hours a day on fantastical irrigation projects, digging canals and building dams with primitive tools. Their daily food ration was nothing more than a bowl of thin rice porridge. Angkar set an unrealistic goal: 3 tons of rice per hectare. An ambitious target, especially when your agricultural engineers were young soldiers who had never seen a water buffalo in real life, and your farmers were university professors trying not to starve to death. Of course, the plan was a catastrophic failure. Famine swept the country. People ate anything they could find: insects, leaves, rats, snakes. Stealing a single mango or a potato was enough to get you executed. Meanwhile, the paranoia of Pol Pot and his cronies grew. They believed their ranks were filled with spies from the CIA, the KGB, and especially from Vietnam. A massive internal purge began. Scores of Khmer Rouge cadres, from the highest ranks to the lowest, were arrested, tortured, and executed. The most infamous site was the S-21 prison, formerly the Tuol Sleng High School in Phnom Penh. Here, over 17,000 people were brutally tortured to force them to confess to imaginary crimes. They confessed to being spies for every intelligence agency in the world, sometimes even for agencies that didn't exist. These confessions were meticulously documented, a testament to the regime's systematic madness. After a confession was extracted, the prisoners were taken to the killing fields of Choyong Ek, on the outskirts of the city, to be executed. To save bullets, they were often killed with shovels, hoes, axes, or by having their heads bashed against a tree. The regime's brutality knew no bounds. They killed people for the most absurd reasons: for knowing a foreign language, for having traveled abroad, for being of Vietnamese or Chinese descent, or simply because Angkar didn't like you. The Khmer Rouge's logic was: to keep you is no gain, to lose you is no loss. That was one of the regime's official slogans. In 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days, the Khmer Rouge regime caused the deaths of an estimated 1.7 to 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population. The country was turned into a giant killing field, littered with mass graves. The culture, intellect, and spirit of an entire nation were almost completely extinguished. While the Cambodian people suffered, the outside world was largely silent. China was the Khmer Rouge's biggest ally, supplying them with weapons and aid. The US and Western nations, licking their wounds after the Vietnam War, had no appetite for further involvement in Indochina. They even saw the Khmer Rouge as a useful counterweight to the influence of Vietnam and the Soviet Union in the region. The politics of great powers can be just that cruel and absurd. What brought this nightmare to an end? Ironically, it was the arrogance and stupidity of the Khmer Rouge themselves. Driven by an extreme nationalist ideology, Pol Pot always considered Vietnam its mortal enemy. They repeatedly launched aggressive attacks across the border into southwestern Vietnam, massacring thousands of civilians, including the horrific Ba Chuk massacre. They believed their army of pure peasants could defeat the Vietnamese army, one of the most battle-hardened forces in the world at the time. They were constantly poking the bear, a much larger and far more powerful neighbor. Finally, Vietnam's patience ran out. In December 1978, the People's Army of Vietnam, along with Cambodian patriotic forces led by figures like Hun Sen and Heng Samrin, launched a full-scale counteroffensive. Pol Pot's army, which was adept only at slaughtering unarmed civilians, crumbled quickly against the might of a professional military. After just 2 weeks, on January 7, 1979, Phnom Penh was liberated. Only then was the world truly horrified, as the first images from S-21 prison and the killing fields were broadcast. Piles of human bones, mountains of skulls, and the haunted faces of the survivors told the whole story. But the story doesn't end there. Once again, it took a bizarre turn, courtesy of international politics. After being driven out, the Khmer Rouge remnants retreated to the Thai border, established bases, and waged a guerrilla war for many years. And who supported them? An unbelievable alliance. China, Thailand, the United States, and other Western countries. Why? Because the new government in Cambodia, installed by Vietnam, was considered a puppet of the Soviet Union. In the logic of the Cold War, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, absurdly, the genocidal Khmer Rouge regime was allowed to keep Cambodia's seat at the United Nations for a decade. Pol Pot, the mass murderer, was still considered a legitimate leader by some world powers. They received aid, weapons, and diplomatic protection, all for the purpose of opposing Vietnam. It took many years, long after the Cold War had ended, for the international community to finally turn its back on the Khmer Rouge. The movement gradually weakened due to internal strife and defections. And what of the masterminds? Pol Pot, brother number one, never faced a court of justice. He died in 1998 of a reported heart attack while under house arrest by his own former comrades in a remote jungle hideout. He died in his bed, perhaps still believing he had done the right thing. Other leaders like brother number two Nuon Chia, Foreign Minister Ieng Sari, and the warden of S-21, Comrade Duke, lived longer. It wasn't until the 2000s that a UN-backed international tribunal was established to try them for their crimes. A few were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Justice arrived, but it was far too late and would never be enough. Today, Cambodia has made a remarkable recovery from the ashes, but the scars remain, both on the land and in the soul. Nearly every family lost loved ones during that dark period. The killing fields in Tuol Sleng are now genocide museums, serving as a chilling reminder to the world of how an extremist ideology, combined with absolute power and international indifference, can lead to unimaginable horror. The story of the Khmer Rouge is not just Cambodia's story. It is a cautionary tale for all of humanity. Beware of those who promise an imagined paradise by destroying everything that exists, because the road to hell is often paved with good intentions, or at least with intentions that sound very grand. And sometimes, the most brutal demons have the gentlest smiles and come from the cafes of Paris. Thanks for watching.